One thing I want you to do is allow your inner voice to take over. The writer is taking something someone else created and using it to create something new. And what remains is your poem. We're going to be talking about blackout, erasure, and found poetry, which all fall under the general umbrella of found poetry. Now, there are some similarities, but there are also differences, and the primary differences is the way in which each is created. And hopefully you're all going to have the opportunity to try your hand at each one of these techniques. The purpose of the workshop is to provide additional tools for your toolbox. We're not going to be able to leave the workshop with a finished product. However, I hope you get a feel for how to create these various forms of poetry. One thing I want you to do is allow your inner voice to take over. It's very important, not only in this type of poetry, but really any type of poetry. And don't be too critical of yourself, which is, you mentioned being a perfectionist. I grew up being taught perfectionism too, so it's very hard not to beat yourself up all the time. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And also, all of my workshops are no critique, no criticism workshops. We're here to support and encourage each other. And I also want this to be an interactive workshop because we can learn from each other. The first thing we're going to talk about is blackout poetry. How many of you have any experience with blackout poetry? Yeah, of course, Teresa. All right. Blackout poetry is a good way to get your creative juices flowing, and it's also a good way to help overcome writer's block. Blackout poetry started with newspapers, but you can use any written material to create a blackout poem, like magazines, old books, other poems, even this handout, if you're so inclined. You begin by choosing your source material. And then you skim through the page to grab ideas, keys, or thoughts, or connecting words, the words that you want to be in your poem. As I said, there's no right or wrong way to do it. Do whatever feels comfortable to you. Identify the words or phrases that you want to use. Be creative. Use your inner voice to guide you. And then, once you've chosen the words that you want to be in your poem, you physically black out everything else using a marker or some other form to black out the words. That's why it's called blackout poetry. And what remains is your poem. And always acknowledge your source. Blackout poetry takes a written piece of text, redacts words, and comes up with your very own thoughts or your very own poetry. It focuses on rearranging words to create a different meaning. The basic premise behind blackout poetry, which is also sometimes referred to as found poetry or erasure poetry, which I consider two different techniques, is that poets take a found document, traditionally a print newspaper, but as I said, it can be any other material, cross out a majority of the existing text, leaving visible only the words that comprise your poem, thereby revealing an entirely new work of literature, birthed from an existing one. That's where using the words of others to create something unique comes in. Blackout poetry is a type of appropriation art. The writer is taking something someone else created and using it to create something new. Now, there are some examples of blackout poetry in the handout. There's one from The Great Gatsby. One autumn night, years before, they came to a place where the moonlight stopped. Change was among the stars. There's also one that I did that is based on Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance. It says, "Scrounge together, smack, for more than one night. Honestly, I'll probably be back tomorrow night." Mm-hmm. And then there's another example at the top. So I want to give you an opportunity to create a blackout poem. I've attached to your handout random pages from the Christmas book, which was published in 1954, and More Stories of the Three Little Pigs, which was published in 1921. So I want you to take one of those pages and create a blackout poem. Identify the words that you want to be in your poem and black out the remainder, and that is your blackout poem.
So it doesn't have to be the full word.
You can do part of a word. You don't have to be that concerned with grammar or syntax. And I've seen it done with part of a word. Anyone want to share what they have written? Go right ahead. I knew you would be willing to.
Oh, then be quiet. Fruitcakes, donuts, fresh molasses cookies. Mother Grunty finished her work and put on her dress. Mysterious wonder peeped out up the gravel path. Opened the door. This walk, the early spring air. Wonderful. Enjoy this house always. Yes, this house. Eat and die, Mother Gert.
Oh,
That was when.
anyone else?
I realize mine's is a little dark too, boy.
That's all right.
Mother Grunty had fruit cakes and sugar donuts and fresh molasses cookies in the cookie box. Thursday finally came. Good Mother Grunty had finished her work. Whiffs of apple pie and chocolate frosting and other mysterious goodies floated everywhere. Mother Grunty peeped out the front window to see dainty Miss Piggy, Pinky Pig in black ears, a little weed coming up to the brick house. She's so pretty and sweet and so very good. Mother Grunty opened the door to greet the three. I've enjoyed this walk so much, smiled Miss Pinky Pig as she seated herself. What a wonderful fireplace. Have you lived in this house always, Mother Grunty? Oh, yes, ever since I could remember, or almost as long. Came at the dreadful time when my two brothers were eaten by the wandering wolf.
You're right. It has a dark ending. Next thing we're going to talk about is erasure poetry. And instead of blacking out the words, it involves erasing words in an existing text to create a new and original poem. It's a method of creating a new work by subtraction. The text of the final poem remains as it appeared on the original page of the text. Again, it's a form of found poetry where the poet takes an existing text and erases a large portion of the text, creating a wholly new work from what remains. So instead of blackout, there are spaces, that are actually physically erased using whiteout or some other technique. Words from the text or article are erased with a whiteout or something similar to only leave behind the words meant to be part of the finished poem. Erasure poetry and blackout poetry are ultimately the same genre. They're just created in a different way. Okay. Blackout poetry covers the page in ink or marker. Erasure poetry utilizes whiteout or deletion to create white spaces, and the words that are remaining are the poem. You erase any words that do not contribute to the purpose of your poem, and you don't feel constrained to perfect grammar or syntax. And your poem should ultimately have something to say. So let's look at the examples of erasure poetry. The first example is based on Donald Trump's The Art of the Deal. Other people paint beautifully or write wonderful poetry. I kick a briefcase. I try not to leave too much structure. Then there's a poem that I wrote about the war in Ukraine, and it's based on an editorial written by Connie Schultz that appeared in the USA Today and the Akron Beacon Journal. Let it go. I was hovering in the kitchen doorway. Mom was weeping. She kept talking. Dad told her this is war. I silently prayed for fellow humans who live far away, who have lived in fear. Entire families are dying from war. We are bearing witness to suffering in Ukraine, seeing images of dead children. I can hear a child's happy voice and break into a smile. We recognize the wisdom of children. A little girl singing in a crowded bomb shelter in Kiev, braids in her hair, stars on her sweater. Amelia sang Let It Go in Ukrainian. That little girl is loved. They grieve because they love. We love and cling to signs of hope. So it's going to be a little challenging to try to write an eraser poem because we don't have whiteout. What I want you to do is take another one of the pages, circle the words that you want to be in your poem, and envision the rest of the page being blank. And one of the techniques I use is, like in Let It Go, I just typed it out, but tried to leave the spaces where they appeared in the original text instead of physically whiting it out. And you can use that technique as well. Now, this technique is very similar to blackout poetry, but you want to try to utilize the spaces to your advantage. Okay, in leaving the words that you want to be in your poem, and the remainder of the page is blank. So use space to your advantage to make a point, or to break a line, or to leave a long pause, for example. I write a lot of poems where I leave a lot of space. It's a new form that I have kind of been experimenting with, and I like it. And it kind of goes back to the beat poets a little bit in the way that they wrote and leaving space in their poems. All right, found poetry. This might be the most challenging of the three techniques. Found poetry achieved prominence in the 20th century, and it is a literary equivalent of a collage. And it's also shares many traits with pop art. Found poems take existing texts and notice texts. You can use one or more, or three or four, and choose words from those texts to create a new poem. You refashion them, reorder them, and present them as a new poem. The found poem consists exclusively of outside text. Words of the poem remain as they were found with few additions or omissions. Decisions of form are left to the poet. Poets may also choose to incorporate snippets of found poems into larger poems. A found poem is created using only words, phrases, and quotations that have been selected and rearranged from another text. To create found poems, poets must choose language that is particularly meaningful or interesting to them and organize the language around a theme or message. The words might not be the poet's own, but their organization is what matters. The poet reimagines what the words mean and reorganizes or recontextualizes them to create something new. For example, in my most recent collection, I have a found poem that combines sources such as The Whipping Girl, a transsexual woman on sexism and scapegoating, by Julie Serrano, Screw the Roses, Give Me the Thorns, The Romance and Sexual Sorcery of Sadomasochism, by Philip Miller and Molly Devon, and the Holy Bible. So I took words from all of those texts and combined them into a poem. You want to choose a structural or thematic purpose. It may be the same as the source material, but it may be something totally different. And construct your poem from the source material. There's some examples of found poetry in the handout, which we really don't have time to take a long look at. One of them is my poem, which appears to be an erasure poem, but it's actually a found poem. So I'm going to give you some time to create a found poem. And this is going to be, you're probably not going to be able to do this in the, well, we really don't have 8 minutes, but I'll give you 5 in the 5 minutes that I'm going to give you. But use a separate sheet of paper. Take words from any of the materials that are attached to the handout or the handout itself or any other materials that you want to use. Select your words or phrases and create a found poem. And I'll give you 5 minutes to do that, which I know is not nearly enough time. If anyone wants to share very quickly, or if you have any questions, comments, concerns, snide remarks, anything anyone wants to say.
Don't invite you, Barbara.
Anybody?
I have a question.
Sure.
In the interest of being chaotic good, can you do any of these forms off of work that is originally yours?
Yeah.
Does it have to be
Yeah.
somebody else?
Yes. I've taken random pages from my journal and turned them into blackout poems. So yes, absolutely, you can use your own work. You could use any written text, whether it's your own or someone else's.
That I'm just
Yep. Any other questions? You have my contact information if you have any follow-up questions. Thank you for being here. I hope you found this meaningful and worthwhile.
You. Nice.